There's a fear that lives so quietly inside. It never shouts. It simply suggests again and again, you're not enough. It hides behind your efforts, weaves itself into your prayers, even disguises itself as humility. But it's fear, not faith. And maybe today, you're just tired. Tired of trying to do it all right. Tired of wondering why the peace never lasts. Tired of waking up and still feeling like you're missing something, even though you've done everything you were told would make you worthy. What if the whole system of earning was never from God? What if heaven never asked you to prove anything? What if the voice that shaped you didn't speak in conditions, but in callings, in love, in stillness, in already? You were never meant to earn this. Not your worth, not your calling, not your belonging. That was sealed in the beginning, before the striving ever began. And if that truth stirs something in you, if it even feels dangerous to believe, then stay, because this isn't a message about how to fix yourself. It's a gentle returning to what was always true. Let this be the whisper that interrupts everything else. The fear of not being enough ends here, and not because you finally measured up, but because heaven never asked you to. Stay. You were never meant to earn this, and now you don't have to. This didn't find you by accident. Not today. Not like this. You may not remember what led you here, but your spirit does. It's been carrying the ache longer than your mind could explain. That quiet, weary ache of trying so hard to be enough, to keep going, to feel okay. And yet somehow you're still standing, still hoping, still open enough to press play on something you didn't even know you needed. That's not weakness, that's sacred strength, because something in you is still listening, not to the noise, but to the whisper beneath it, the one that says, there's more than this. You weren't made to survive like this forever. So let's pause the pretending. You don't have to be fine here. You don't have to perform peace. You get to sit down in this space, spirit first, and exhale. Yes, you're tired. Yes, you've been faithful, and still, something in you aches to know if you've missed it, if you've disappointed God somehow. But what if the ache isn't proof of failure, but evidence that your soul still longs for alignment? This moment, this message, is not random. It's timed, appointed, seen by the one who still calls you by name. So if this feels like something your spirit has been waiting for, stay close. Because when heaven speaks, it often sounds like recognition, like home. And sometimes, it begins with something as simple as this: subscribing to what brings you back to truth. So go ahead, subscribe to Calm, MS, called, not for noise, but for the next whisper you didn't know you needed. You've prayed, you've served, you've forgiven when it hurt, and stayed when it was easier to run. You've said yes to the call, even when you weren't sure where it would lead. You've read the verses, spoken the affirmations, cried in the dark when no one could see. And yet, somewhere deep inside, the question still whispers, why do I still feel so empty? You've done what faith told you to do, what obedience looked like. You've performed the part, you've even grown from it. But that hollow ache remains, not because you did it wrong, not because you didn't believe hard enough, but because the system you were handed was never built to satisfy your soul. The truth? You can't earn what's already yours. You can't perform your way into identity. You can only receive it. That's the ache you've been carrying, not the absence of God, but the exhaustion of thinking you still need to prove something to stay close. What if you didn't have to anymore? What if, right here, you could finally stop striving and let peace come to you? The fear of not being enough doesn't go away because you do more. It begins to dissolve when you dare to believe this. You were enough before you began. This is the shift, the turning point, and if you stay with me, you'll begin to hear a different voice, one that never asked you to earn what was always yours. Fear doesn't need to roar. It just needs to repeat itself often enough until you start calling it wisdom, It sounds responsible, cautious. It disguises itself as discernment, maturity, even spiritual excellence. But its root is decay. It tells you you're not ready, not pure enough, not worthy yet. And while you chase perfection, you delay presence, you delay peace, you delay purpose. Because fear, especially the kind wrapped in religion, doesn't need to destroy you directly. It only needs to convince you to keep proving yourself a little longer, to keep earning your right to rest. That's why the enemy loves this fear. It doesn't feel like sin. It feels like self-discipline. It feels noble, and that's what makes it so dangerous. Because instead of resting in identity, you keep working for approval. Instead of walking in grace, you keep climbing invisible ladders, and every step whispers, "Not yet, not quite, almost there." But grace doesn't say, "almost." Grace says, "Come." Grace says, "Enough." Grace says, "It is finished." This fear, this chronic never enough, it's not just exhausting, it's strategic. Because when you're busy managing shame, you stop listening for truth. You stop hearing the voice that still calls you chosen. You stop trusting the quiet. But here's the shift. You can learn to recognize that voice for what it island. Not your conscience, not God's conviction, but a counterfeit system designed to keep you small. Because small people don't walk boldly. They hesitate. They second guess. They hide behind performance. But you weren't born to hide. You were born to move. In freedom, and freedom doesn't begin when you finally get it right. It begins the moment you believe this. God is not waiting on you to become enough. He's waiting on you to believe you already are. Long before your name was known, He had already spoken it with love. Before your story began, your purpose was written in light. You weren't called after you figured things out. You weren't chosen because of your behavior. You were called before you could recite the verses, before you could pray the right words, before you could apologize for everything you thought disqualified you. This calling, this sacred belonging, has never been something you could earn. It was placed on you like a mantle, woven into your soul, before you knew what soul even meant. And yet, somewhere along the way, you were taught that calling must be proven, that it must be validated, through works, through perfection, through performance. You were told God would stay close, only if you stayed clean, that you had to achieve peace before you could receive it, that grace had limits, and love had terms. But God's love doesn't negotiate. It initiates, it chooses, it covers, and it calls. You were called when your voice still trembled, when your thoughts were messy, when your heart was unsure, when you didn't even know who you were. That's the power of grace. It moves toward you, not because of what you've done, but because of who you are. And who you are was never up for debate. You are the beloved. You are the pursued. You are the one He left the 99 to find. So now the question becomes, will you keep trying to prove something He already declared? Or will you finally sit down in your soul and let that truth become home again? You were called before you could prove anything, and you are still called, right here, right now, exactly as you are. There comes a moment, quiet but undeniable, when you know, I can't live like this anymore. Not because of anger, not even despair, but because your spirit finally refuses to keep cycling through shame. You've tasted just enough truth to know there must be more than this. And here at Island, the line, drawn not in punishment, but in invitation. It's not a line of condemnation. It's a threshold, a holy moment where you get to choose, not whether you're loved, but whether you'll live like it. You've lived in the space of almost free long enough. You've carried guilt like a backpack full of bricks, hoping it would somehow turn into humility. But humility is not self-hatred, and guilt is not growth. This is the line where striving ends, where self-judgment loses its grip, where your yes becomes more than survival, it becomes surrender. You don't have to keep apologizing for who you are. You don't have to keep delaying joy until you feel more spiritual. You don't need one more book, one more fast, one more performance. All you need is willingness to cross the line, to believe that the door has always been open. That love has been waiting on the porch, lamp in hand, calling you home, because once you step over, you'll notice something sacred. The fear loses its shape. It's not gone entirely, but it's no longer in control. And in its place, grace, the real kind, the kind that doesn't excuse you, it restores you. Right now, you're standing on sacred ground, not because you prayed hard enough, but because you're finally ready to stop proving and start living. So here's the truth. This is the line. You get to cross it. You're safe to leave the old system behind and step into the identity that was never up for negotiation. If fear could talk, you already know what it would say. You've heard it for years. You've memorized its lines. You've even started mistaking its voice for your own. Be careful. Don't dream too big. You're probably being selfish. What if you mess it up? What if you were never called at all? But what would trust say right now? Not the loud kind of trust, not the shouting declarations, the quiet trust, the kind that settles deep like still water over chaos. What if trust said, even here, you are safe. Even now, God is near. You don't need a plan to be loved. You don't need to see the next step to be guided. Can you feel the difference? One voice tightens your chest, the other opens it. One keeps you small, the other makes room for your soul to breathe. What if, for just this moment, you let trust speak louder than fear? Not forever, just now. What would it change? What weight would fall? What permission would enter? Trust might tell you to rest, to stop trying so hard, to take the next breath without earning it. It might whisper, you're already where you need to be. This process is not proof of failure, it's formation. God's not in a rush, He's in the room. And maybe you don't need more instructions. Maybe you need presence, to sit in the truth that you are already seen, already held, already worthy, before anything changes. So just ask, quietly in your own heart, what would trust say right now? Then wait. Let the answer come without pressure. Let it unfold like light across water, because if you listen, you'll hear something holy, not a demand, but an embrace, not a correction, but a confirmation. And maybe for the first time, you'll know that voice is God's too. We've been taught to fear conviction, to confuse it with guilt, to believe that the Spirit's voice must always sting, always cut, always remind us of how far we've fallen. But what if the Spirit speaks differently? What if His voice is not a dagger, but a doorway? Scripture says He comforts, He guides, He testifies of truth. He reminds us of Jesus. But guilt loops. It accuses without healing. It magnifies shame and calls it spiritual awareness. Guilt leaves you stuck, treading water in a sea of self-disappointment. The Spirit calls you out of that water, onto steady ground. Yes, He convicts, but always with clarity, never confusion. He never condemns. He corrects like a father, not a fault finder. And when He speaks, your spirit doesn't shrink. It lifts, it remembers, it returns. Have you noticed it? The moments you feel drawn closer, not pushed away, the whispers that remind you, you're still mine. There's more for you. Come back into the light. That's Him, not the voice that echoes your failures, but the one who reminds you of your foundation. The Spirit doesn't guilt trip you into obedience. He breathes love into your lungs until you want to come home again. So maybe it's time to stop calling guilt Holy Spirit. Maybe it's time to stop giving shame a seat at the table of discernment. God is not a harsh critic. He's a relentless comforter. And when His Spirit speaks, it sounds like mercy. It sounds like memory. It sounds like hope calling you by name. This is what the Spirit sounds like. Peaceful, powerful, personal, and never cruel. It feels like you're behind. Like you missed the window. Like everyone else heard the signal, and you somehow didn't move fast enough. You scroll through stories, see the milestones, and whisper quietly to your own heart, "Why am I still here? Did I miss it?" But heaven doesn't run on human clocks, and delay is not the same as disqualification. Some seasons are not about acceleration, they're about alignment, because rushing into what's next, without being rooted in who you are, is not progress, it's exhaustion. Realignment doesn't always look holy. It often looks like silence, stillness, empty calendars, doors that don't open, dreams that seem dormant. But realignment is sacred work. It's the Spirit reordering your insides, so that when the invitation comes, you don't sabotage it with shame. You're not being punished. You're being positioned, not for perfection, but for peace. And peace is what prepares you to walk fully in the purpose that's already yours. The enemy will try to call it failure, but your soul knows better. It knows something holy is being built beneath what looks like delay. Even now, your spirit is remembering the rhythm, the divine pace you once knew, before fear taught you to rush. And in that rhythm, there are no missed chances, no expired callings, no disqualified hearts, only return, only restoration, only a Father who says, "You're right on time because you're with me." Then some of the vrising rechten friendituri and termid interzast, and friended from the downrast in bias out of white, heaven de sings, and down from the sum of the vrisen vies on the south, and the sum of the vrisen vio was a friended downrast, bias out of risen, and friended bias out of risen. So breathe. The pace of others is not your measure. Their fruit is not your proof. You're not falling behind. You're being realigned. So when grace moves, you move with it. For so long, you've looked outside yourself for confirmation, waiting for someone to say it's okay to trust what you feel, what you know, what's been whispering from within. But there's a voice you've silenced, not out of rebellion, but out of fear that it couldn't possibly be holy, that if it was yours, it couldn't be God's. And yet, that voice was never just yours. It's the place where the Spirit speaks through your spirit. The place where conviction feels like clarity and peace begins to rise without needing permission. Yes, we test the spirits. Yes, we seek wisdom. But too often, we spiritualize self-abandonment and call it submission. God never asked you to disappear. He asked you to become, to embody what He already planted, to speak with the voice He entrusted you to carry. And that voice? It's not arrogant. It's not reckless. It's not your ego trying to build a platform. It's the whisper that says, "I know this path isn't popular, but it's the one I'm being drawn to. I don't want to betray myself just to be accepted." This season may look small, but it feels sacred. You've ignored that voice because you were told God only speaks from pulpits, platforms, and other people. But He speaks in gardens too, in quiet rooms, in kitchen sinks and slow mornings. He speaks in your thoughts, your questions, your instincts soaked in grace. It's not rebellion to listen within. It's returning to where the Spirit has always lived, in you. The voice you've been ignoring is the one He's been using all along. It won't shout, but it will speak when you're ready to believe that your discernment isn't dangerous. It's divine. This whole time, you weren't broken beyond repair. You weren't delayed beyond redemption. You weren't overlooked by heaven. You were simply becoming, slowly, sacredly, invisibly. Because wholeness isn't something you chase. It's something you remember. Something you uncover beneath the layers of fear and striving. All the ways you've been trying to fix yourself, to earn your way back to peace, have only buried the truth deeper, but not lost it. Never lost. It's been here, waiting, underneath the lies that said you had to do more, underneath the guilt that said you weren't enough, underneath the fear that told you healing was only for the perfect. But here's what the Spirit is saying now. Come home, not to a version of yourself you have to invent, but to the one I created, the one that's still here, stronger than shame, softer than guilt, ready to rise. Wholeness doesn't erase your past. It redeems it. It reframes it through mercy and stitches it back together with gentleness. That ache you've carried, it wasn't evidence of distance. It was the echo of something divine calling you back. And now you've heard it. You've followed it. You've arrived. Not in perfection, but in presence. Wholeness was never about arriving somewhere new. It was always about returning to what never left, to who you've always been, in the eyes of the one who formed you. So stay here. Let this be your breath. Let this be your knowing. You are already whole, already called, already loved. Close your eyes, if you can. Let your shoulders drop. Let your breath return slow, sacred, unforced. You've carried enough, proven enough, pressed through enough. And now, it ends. Not in anger, not in collapse, but in grace. The fear of not being enough, it has run its course. It's spoken its last false prophecy. And now, in this holy hush, we lay it down. Would you pray with me? God, I've tried so hard to be worthy, to be good, to earn what you already gave. And I'm tired, but not lost, not unloved. So right now, with empty hands and an open heart, I surrender the lie that I am not enough. I lay down the striving, the pressure, the quiet shame I've called humility. I lay down my fear that your love has limits, and I receive what has always been waiting for me. Your grace, your delight, your voice calling me by name. Today, I cross the line. I begin again, not in my own strength, but in the truth that I've always been yours. Amen. Now breathe. Feel the silence after surrender. Notice how still the soul becomes when it no longer needs to perform. You didn't find this message by accident. You were drawn here by something deeper than curiosity. This was divine timing, and you are walking into a new season, not as someone finally fixed, but as someone who remembers. Remembers who you are, whose you are. So don't rush away. Let the peace stay longer this time. Let the present settle in, and when the next whisper comes, let it find you ready to receive it. If this space brought you peace, if this voice reminded you of your own, stay with us, not for noise, but for the quiet that heals. Subscribe to Calm, Called, because you weren't meant to earn your place. You were meant to rest in it. And here, you're already home.